Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, today's episode is really looking at the plans for the Station Road layout for 2023. So I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and a happy new year, and we're now sort of a week and a bit into 2023. So I thought it quite appropriate and poignant to look at actually what's on the cards for the layout this year. So I'm going to divide this episode up into two main areas on the layout, and also covering what is left in the way of more hardcore construction, and then also what is more cosmetic and relating to landscape and all of that type of thing. So I've taken a photo with a very wide angle lens in order to be able to capture the layout in its entirety, and you'll have to excuse the fact that this fisheye lens does warp everything quite considerably, although I have actually adjusted it. But this really shows the layout as it is currently at the moment. Now I'm just going to overlay two areas on the layout that need construction work actually done on it. So this is really the base landscape forms and so forth that still are yet to be done, and I'm hoping to be able to possibly tick both of these areas off this year. So I think without further ado, we'll just jump over to these two specific areas that have been outlined in the overall view and take a look at what my plans are for these two areas. So we'll take a look at this particular area now, and of course I built this extension maybe a year or so back, and of course this is as far as it got, and all the tracks laid, and I'm pretty happy with that. So it's now sort of looking at what's happening in this area here. Now there is a access hole in there for me to clamber in there and get up and get over to the far wall over here where we've got some fiddle yards and so forth. So the plan here is there'll be an extension to the depot area, so the rest of the depot is down at that end there. Now rather than just having everything flat and at the same level as the mainline tracks, the plan is to have this level slightly raised up, which can then allow also for this coaling stage to be situated in here somewhere. So none of this is the actual position of these structures at this stage. It is very roughly worked out. So the Northlight engine shed will be at a slightly higher level than this track bed, along with the actual loading area for the coaling stage, but then the actual where the locomotives come and fill up their tenders will actually be below this track level. So there's going to be a bit of a split in track levels here. Now it's only going to be very subtle because I don't want horrific gradients on here or for it to look a little bit out of place in that sense. So really my big question was what's going to happen here in this area here where the tracks do a full 180 degree turn and head back. Now my philosophy when it comes to this kind of areas here where you've got track that's seen at the moment is to attempt to try and hide it. So the impression is that these lines head off maybe out that way somewhere, and those lines over at the back wall head out that way, and you don't actually see this 180 degree turn in the track. So thinking of scenic breaks that can somehow work in here, of course I could just build up another hillside up against this corner in here, but I did want to sort of think about something different, and it sort of stems from my fascination for YouTubers who explore abandoned railways in the UK, and there's a fair number of you guys, and I watch all of your channels and they are absolutely brilliant. Love watching old infrastructure being explored within Great Britain. So it's something I've always sort of thought I would love to have on the layout, and that is an abandoned railway, and I mean fully abandoned, so no track left, fully overgrown, and really the remnants of the fact there was a line that used to be there. So what I'm actually thinking about doing is running directly on an angle right across from one side of the layout to the other is an abandoned railway viaduct, a double track viaduct that runs across here and actually quite high. So this is going to be quite a dominating structure, and what it's going to do is sort of block off this corner in here from a visual standpoint. Now I was thinking of either making it an open arch viaduct, or whether it is actually a filled in viaduct, so the arches are actually filled in, and these are often seen running through cityscapes within the UK, raised tracks running across brick viaducts where the arches of course were filled in and often were occupied by businesses and so forth. So that's the plan, is having something that's going to run through here. Now I sort of roughly sketched up some visuals to sort of see how it might work. So the plan is, behind the main viaduct I'm actually going to level off an upper level. Through here will actually be some further urban landscape and town scene, potentially industrial, but I'm leaning more towards a urban town scene up here where I can put in some further streets and so forth, but it will be at a lower level but high enough up to cover the tracks underneath. Then there will be this brick viaduct which will be at a higher level, and then on the other side where we now have the position for the engine shed and depot area, one of the arches I'm thinking it could be some road access into this particular area. So there's quite a lot to actually do in this area. So the plan is that this chunk here running through, where we've also got the lines leading into the engine shed, that will be another fixed extension of baseboard. So that will be fixed right through, running along this sort of edge here. Then the actual cavity section in here will be a lift out section, because I don't really want to lose the accessibility in that particular area, and the opportunity to be able to raise out a section in here to gain access. But when I'm not in there, this whole area could potentially be filled in and landscaped, which I think will really sort of benefit this area of the layout. So the entry point of course is down here, and this will actually be at a raised level. So I'll swivel the camera around over to this other end here and sort of roughly describe what I'm planning to do there, which is going to be a little bit of surgery, unfortunately. So I'm just going to use my stick as the pointer. So this is where the entry point comes into the engine shed area, and then of course we've got our existing engine shed over here, which is going to be retained, and of course this track work here is going to be retained as well. But what I'm planning on doing is heading all the way back to where the entry point is onto the main line over here by the end of the platforms. I've drawn a black line here. I'm not sure how well this is going to show up on the camera. There's a black line there, and the intention is to split this baseboard all the way through here, to this point here. There's going to be another split up to this point where this section of track is, and another split that's going to head back the other side where the entry point is, and this will then be raised. So this section of track will actually begin to come up an incline, but it's going to be very gradual. At this point here, it's probably only going to be about 10 millimeters higher than where it currently is, but about here maybe it's 5 mil higher, or maybe this is 10 mil and that's 15 mil. I haven't worked all of that out yet. And then what's going to happen is this area of this particular depot area, so this track here and the engine shed tracks and this sort of working area around here, that is actually going to be raised slightly, so it will be up slightly higher. So the incline is going to come up to this point and reach these level of sidings, which will be just slightly higher, and then from here this line of track will continue up the incline to a slightly higher point, and then from there lead on and up into the other engine shed. So what it's going to mean, of course, is quite a bit of surgery as well in this area of the baseboard. Raising the entire level of that area is probably going to be a little bit complicated, but I think there's some benefits in it, because what it's going to do is raise that engine shed slightly higher, which means that I can actually build a bit of a retaining wall in behind the back there. Of course, where it meets the road access, that will be just slightly higher as well, so it's not such a drop down from the road. And of course the embankment on the other side of the engine sheds, that will also be shortened along its edge, where of course the baseboard level will be slightly higher. So there's quite a bit involved in that, and a lot of planning to work out how it's all going to come together. So as I described earlier, from about this point through on a little bit of an unusual angle, there is going to be some fixed new baseboard here. So that'll run through on whatever the line is that actually works out for this, but then from this point on there will actually be a lift out hatch in here, so that I can actually still get into this area here. It will be quite narrow, and I'm certainly going to have to cut back on the chocolate biscuits if I want to still be able to get in here. So while I'm in the area, there's quite a lot of other things to do throughout this year around here, and that will actually be doing a back scene. We've been lacking back scenes on the layout for quite a few years now, and I really need to start focusing on that as well. So along the back of this wall here, where we've got our 3 main lines, or our branch line and 2 main lines, there's going to be a small retaining wall that's going to rise up just a little bit, and then there's going to be kind of a little bit like a forced perspective embankment that's going to rise up, that's going to stretch all the way along there. Now this component needs to be removable, because this section of track through here is actually on hinges, and the whole thing hinges up against the wall so that I can get to the fiddle yard that's underneath there. So that will be a lift out section, and then beyond that, of course, we're just going to have a printed flat back seam. So that has also got to somehow tie in with this disused abandoned viaduct that's going to run across on this angle. So we're now looking at the other end of this recently worked up raised goods yard area, and of course I've worked on the other end where the transition between the new and the existing baseboard comes into play, whereas down here I haven't done anything yet. So this is another project on the agenda for this year, and that is actually completing this transition between the existing and the raised section of this goods yard. So the plan is to put a bit of a retaining wall around this corner here, meeting up with this bridge, but it won't go all the way up this road. And at some point then we've got some landform that is going to come down and meet the road, and then of course through here it will meet a bit of a retaining wall as it goes around this area here. And I sort of roughly sketched up a plan of how that might look, with some contour lines showing how the landform might work in this area. And it also includes working the road in with the actual street up at the top end of the hill there, so that that will line up nicely with the street entrance. So talking about this area here where the road coming up the hillside connects with the street running along here, what I'm planning on doing is reconfiguring this whole area, because this whole hill is going to be reconfigured as well. It was built many years ago, and it's got this dishwashing cloth on it, which I cut up and painted green, and it's now sort of drooping down and so forth. And of course that's come about when I put in this extension, which is all part of an extension that's over that way there. So this is actually all going to be ripped out and redone. So originally there used to be a cottage or homestead up here on the hill, and that used to sort of sit in about there somewhere. So I'm going to repurpose this homestead further in somehow on this hill section, and create a little bit of a farm scene up here, because I've also got a barn that I modelled possibly a year back, and do something in this area and line it up with this bit of hill section here, which is a lift out section, which you can just make out at the top of the screen here. So the plan here is, rather than this road hitting a back scene right here and just going straight into it, which can usually always sort of result in complications in terms of an actual back scene here and how it's all going to work. So the plan is to actually run this road this way from the street and then curve off into the back scene here, and this will enable me to sort of hide the road as it disappears off into the back scene. So essentially this will become a T intersection the other way around. So the hill road will come up and meet the street, which is going to curve off, so the T intersection will actually be like that. So I'll put together a wee sort of rough sketch of how this intersection will work, and then slowly rise up here. Of course we've got to consider the clearances for some track work that's directly underneath here, and then it might be a case of lining some trees and so forth on either side of the road, so that it kind of disappears off behind trees. So I've just marked out with a pen here where essentially I'm going to cut along here. So the tunnel portal that you can just see here, I'm going to retain that, and also would like to retain part of this cliff face here, or embankment here, which is modelled out of some plaster, but of course trim it a little bit, because I'm quite happy with this, although this is not finished either. It needs a lot of work on it to get that real sort of rock effect to it, but essentially from this line that I've drawn here, all of this is going to be replaced and ripped out. So there we have it. That pretty much covers the two remaining areas on the layout that require some quite in-depth construction and landscaping in order to finish them off. So aside from these two main areas, of course, which need some pretty much full-on construction and landscaping, there is also a lot of cosmetic work still yet to be done on the layout, and this includes landscaping, scenery, static grasses, trees. We've still got street scenes to complete. We have got street tarmac or road tarmac to apply. There are street lights to add. There is more lighting to add into buildings. There is possibly some more buildings to create and add to the layout. Then we've also got track ballasting, and of course that's one item that's been waiting in the wings for quite a few years now. So as you can see, I've certainly got my work cut out for me this year on the station road layout. So briefly looking at what's happening in the next video, I'll be returning to the coal merchant's yard where further work has been carried out there, and also actually spreading a little bit further afield with the goods yard as well, and some progress that I've made in that area too. And following on from the goods yard area, I think I'll begin tackling one of these areas, which of course is the road that runs up the hillside and the transition between the raised goods yard and the hillside, and actually start doing some work in that area. So I'll be interested to hear some feedback on the plans that I have in place for the layout during this year, and in particular I'd be quite interested to hear from people what their thoughts are on this disused viaduct and how to use this as a scenic break for the 180-degree curve in the track. So if anyone's sort of got any thoughts on that, or maybe there's some other ideas out there that I haven't considered that might be worth dropping into the plan drawer. So I'll leave it there for this episode. Do take care, look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.